artificial intelligence, whenever we come across this term, it's very common that we think of Arnold, we think of Terminator, we think of Robocop, we think of so many different movies, so many different concepts, and it's very common for us professionals to think. I'm sure lawyers must have heard for the past decade about IBM Watson. They have come across a lot of discussions jahan pe, they were told that the AI is going to replace professionals, AI is going to replace lawyers, company secretaries, chartered accountants. But I have a very interesting example to start this discussion. This example I read somewhere in the year 2018. Now, imagine a vehicle. We all know there's a car and there's a driver's seat there. Now, we all know that in most countries, in most states, let's for the time being, let's address this issue to be an Indian issue. So, in most states, drinking and driving is an offense. Yes, I mean it is something that can cause accidents, which can which can cause disruption in traffic. Therefore, it's an offense. Now, imagine a car, and right at the driver's seat, when the driver sits inside the car, imagine a situation where the artificial intelligence, by its own ability, it checks if the driver has consumed alcohol or no. And if the driver has consumed alcohol, the car won't start in the first place. Now, this is how I look at artificial intelligence. It is an enabler, it is a capacity which solves problems, which solves smallest problems with, with the application of its own intelligence for the benefit of the user. Now, in this case, what will happen is, if the car doesn't start in the first place, the driver will not be able to drive. And therefore, it will save accidents. It will save all that tamjam that happens during the traffic, where the police guy is checking with that device, he's checking whether the person has consumed alcohol or no. All that process gets eliminated. And that is the vision with which artificial intelligence was developed. And that is the essence of how artificial intelligence can be put to use. Now, during our discussion, we are going to touch upon various topics as to we first get introduced to what artificial intelligence is. We will discuss about its legal personality. We are going to discuss about the liabilities, the criminal liabilities, and how artificial intelligence can actually work in favor of professionals. So introduction is, so this is a beautiful quote that I had come across. A year spent in artificial intelligence is enough to make one believe in God. Now, this right at the inception, this statement, this quote looks very inappropriate or incomplete for that matter. Now, why does it look incomplete? Is because there is no parallels between artificial intelligence, there's no nexus between artificial intelligence and God that we can think of, that we can connect. But the author of this quote wanted to express that as God has limitless possibilities of creation, of management, and of destruction, the same capabilities are carried by artificial intelligence as well. So a year spent in AI is enough to make one believe in God. Now, what is AI? So AI, let's just address this point first. AI is not a calculator. AI is not automation. Because it's very common for people to get confused between automation of something and AI. Calculation or a device that calculates something for you and AI. There are two essential elements in AI which we will be discussing: the autonomous nature and the intelligence, which we will be discussing subsequently. So what is AI? AI is a capability to copy or imitate the human brain by a machine. So a human brain is made of muscle, tissues, water, and a lot of other ingredients. And it is there fit in our head, under our skull. and every human being has it. Yeah, it's a muscular organ and has physical limits, but no known operational limits. So there are several theories which suggest that the human brain has been used just 1%, 2%, 0.5%, so on and so forth. And it's a very technical discussion, so I'll not touch upon that. But the fact remains that it has no known operational limits. It's just a muscular organ. Similarly, with AI, however, because of its autonomous nature, it can work on its limitations independently. Now, here I will invite the attention of people who have studied arbitration. They know of a very interesting concept called competence. That means arbitration tribunal itself can decide on its jurisdiction. That balance can be drawn for AI as well. AI is so self-sufficient, it is so efficient, and it is so powerful that it can, due to its autonomous nature and the intelligence, it can work and increase its limitations independently. And this is where things start getting beautiful, right? Because a calculator, for that matter, let's say a calculator has certain limitations, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then you have certain working options, you have multiplications, you have additions, so on and so forth. And that's it. So I cannot type an email in a calculator, right? So the powers of a calculator are very, very limited to the act of calculation. Right. However, in case of AI, because it is autonomous and because it has its own intelligence, it can work on its limitations and increase or decrease its limitations. Right. So this is a point that we will be discussing again and again throughout the session. Now, there are two types of AI. One is a weak AI. It has a very specific uh, list of tasks to do. Right. So a simple example of this would be if anybody has visited the website Make My Trip or any other website where once you visit that website, there's a small twing chatbot that comes up. Yeah. And that chatbot asks you that, hey, I'm your friend for this website, and what is it that you want? Right. The whole purpose of that chatbot is not to explore or to discuss or to chit chat with you. It just wants to get your email ID, phone number, and the destination where you want to go, so that that information is captured, passed on to the backend, and then the backend communicates with you, calls you, and asks you, hey, aapko kahan jana hai? Right? So the purpose is fixed, specific purpose, right? Unka purpose बहुत specific होता है, and that kind of IA or that type of IA is called weak IA. As against that, there is a strong IA, which is a broader IA, which involves an entire system or chain of events, right? And the use of that system or the system can be, the power of that system can be harnessed to solve bigger problems. For example, terrorism is a bigger problem the entire world is fighting. Environmental climate change is a huge problem that the entire world is seeking an answer to, right? So these are bigger undefined problems where the system of that AI can be put to use, and that AI can start solving the questions. So weak AI is designed for specific tasks. Strong AI is designed as a system to address bigger issues or more intense or serious issues which involve a lot of decision making, right? Uh, all right. So this is a very, very interesting discussion. Now we are getting into the mainstream discussion about AI. Now, AI का जब भी जिक्र होता है, the first thing that comes up is, यार ये AI को क्या माना जाए? Should we consider it as a distinct legal entity? Now we all are professionals here. Salman versus Salman, सबने पढ़ा हुआ है. I'm sure Companies Act पढ़ते पढ़ते the concept of distinct legal entity becomes like you're one of the most comfortable topics to understand. But this discussion is quite important. Why? Because if we have a defined legal personality for AI, that means that we can thereafter regulate that AI. We will be discussing about this subsequently. Now, the goal of artificial intelligence is very specific: enhance and increase the efficiency of a system, of humans, of a process, to enhance and increase the efficiency, to enhance and increase the smoothness of working. That is the primary goal, or historically, that has been the goal of AI, why AI was developed, why AI was researched on, to enhance and increase the efficiency of a process, of certain steps, so that the person who is performing it can focus his attention to other issues. This was the whole idea why AI was developed. Now, the two important aspects of AI that we spoke about previously, these two are probably the most important points to discuss in this entire topic. One is to understand what autonomous means, and two is to understand what intelligent means. Now, these are just two words we use very commonly, very in a casual manner, but these two words are like an oxygen to AI: autonomous and intelligent. If either of these two words is absent, that system stops being an AI. Now, what is autonomous? To break it down simply, is it works without outside inputs. It works without outside inputs. Plus, it can take independent decisions. Oh, I think there's a spell error. I'm so sorry for that. It works without outside inputs and can take independent decisions. Right? So this is autonomous. Now, when I say works without outside inputs, do I mean that it will not require any energy resource or any electricity or cells or batteries? No, that's not what I'm hinting at. I'm talking about it works without inputs from a human counterpart. So that means if you have coded an AI, that's it. You don't have to keep coding it again and again. It starts thinking on its own. It starts working on its own. So the first point is autonomous. It works without outside inputs. And second, it can take independent decisions. Now, again, this independent decisions is what makes it an artificial intelligence and not just a calculating device and not just a technology device, right? So it works without outside inputs. This has to be understood very clearly. It works without outside inputs and it can take independent decisions. And the second aspect of this is it needs to be intelligent. Now, when I say intelligent, it means it can program itself. Once it has received its arms, its limbs, its legs, its hands and legs, it can start doing things on its own. It can program itself, and plus it can process information and integrate it in a frame. So let's say there's an AI device which is made, right? So it can, because it can program itself, it can take its own independent decisions. And if there are any additional facts, if there are any additional circumstances, or if there are any additional, if there is any additional information that it is exposed to, it can integrate it, it can process it, it can integrate it, and immediately start putting it in a frame. It can start working on the basis of the changed circumstances. A classic example of this would be an auto-driven, AI-driven car, right? If it is going from Bombay to Delhi, there are several stops, there are several places where the type of roads will keep changing, where the atmosphere will change, where the trees, the kind of the length of the roads may change. A lot of things keep changing. It starts adjusting itself to the circumstances, to the additional information that it is exposed to, and it starts capturing it, puts it in a frame, and starts working on the basis of this change, on the basis of these changed circumstances as well. Okay, so without making it sound very complicated, very simply, we need to understand that it should be autonomous and it should be intelligent. If either of these two is missing, then it will not be qualified as an AI, right? So it has to be autonomous, it has to be intelligent, and legal personality is not equal to being a human being. So we are focusing on the concept of legal personality. right? So we all understand that there can be a juristic personality, there can be a distinct legal entity, which is not a human being, but it is governed by humans, right? So you have companies, you have trusts, you have LLPs, so on and so forth, which is wherein the decision-making body are a couple of human beings, are a set of persons who sit in the boardroom, who sit as partners, who sit as trustees, and who give a direction to that entity. Whereas in case of AI, nothing of that sort is happening. There is no person who's sitting inside that device and telling the device, boss, yahan se tu Delhi chala ja. No. And that is why we have to identify, we have to understand this distinction that a legal personality is not equal to being a human, right? So next interesting discussion is the need for legal personality. As I said, the whole point of this discussion or this deliberation about legal personality, ascribing legal personality to AI, is to be able to regulate it. So if there is something which does not have any legal personality, it cannot be regulated. So it's an established thing. We all know that, right? So किसी भी चीज को अगर regulate करना है, तो first हमें उसको एक legal personality ascribe करनी पड़ेगी. First we have to give, or first we have to identify that thing within a definition of a legal personality, right? Something that does not possess legal personality cannot be regulated, right? So now, is this the same as existence? Something may exist in the world, but may not have a legal personality ascribed to it. Can it be possible? Yes, it's absolutely possible. There are so many things which are not recognized legally by laws, by governments, by sovereigns, but they still exist. Right. So we are not talking again about existence. We are talking about ascribing legal personality to AI. Right. So every person or entity is subject of rights and duties, but for that first needs to be a defined legal entity. So अगर जब तक AI को legal entity दिया नहीं जाएगा, till the time it is not recognized as a legal personality, there is no way any government, any authority can regulate this AI. Right? So we need to understand the requirement, the basic fundamental requirement to regulate an AI, to come up with AI regulation, is to first ascribe certain legal personality to this AI. Right? So insofar as judicial views are concerned, they are very uncertain about this. Throughout the world, there are certain developments which have happened, wherein the governments have passed certain laws where they are in the process of establishing commissions, establishing think tanks as to how this legal personality can be ascribed. But for all practical purposes, we are still in the midst of this confusion whether to ascribe any legal personality to AI or not. So judicial view on this, as I said, is uncertain. However, the judiciary has started to recognize AI and its powers, or the utilization of AI as a modality to achieve the ends of justice. That we will discuss subsequently. So I hope this is clear that the legal personality is the fundamental concept which needs to be addressed first. Primary discussion has to happen whether the AI should be having a legal personality or no, and only then we will be in a position to regulate AI and devices which will possess AI. Now, जहां पे आती है लीगल पर्सनालिटी, वहां पे आती है लाइबिलिटी. सो दैट स्पाइडरमैन का वो डायलॉग मुझे बड़ा पसंद है, व्हेन यू गेट ग्रेट, विद ग्रेट पावर कम्स ग्रेट रिस्पांसिबिलिटी, एंड विद ग्रेट रिस्पांसिबिलिटी कम्स लाइबिलिटी. So yes, because unless there is a legal personality ascribed to AI, unless we recognize an AI as a legal entity, it is impossible to make an AI liable for an offense, for a wrongdoing, right? So to understand liability, we first need to understand bias. Now, bias is a word that we use very commonly. अरे ये तो बहुत biased है, that judge is biased, or that authority is biased, or this is biased, that is biased. But now, what is bias? In the simplest form, I think the term bias is absence of fairness. We all are students of law here, CAs, CSs, and lawyers. So we know what fairness is. We've studied this extensively, the jurisprudence of it. Uh, there are certain layers to this term fairness. Now, fairness is attained when three things come together. One is facts, the second is law, and the third is the effect, the understanding of effect of one and two. So it is a result of evolved human mind and not just advancement in calculations or facts coming together. That means that whenever a judge, let's say for example, or any adjudicating authority, is putting its mind and putting its thoughts together and being fair, it is considering facts, it is considering certain regulations and laws, and it is also considering that this decision of that authority is going to have certain effect on the society, on the people at large, right? And that is the reason why they have to be fair. There has to be a midway, or there has to be a common ground for all these aspects to come together. And that's where fairness is attained. Now, fairness is attained considering several aspects of a fact and its effects that may follow. Correct? So it's not just, as I said, it's not just the fact, the law that is being discussed or that is being considered. Also, the effects of their decision is going to be kept in their view whenever they are considering these three aspects together to arrive at a fair decision. Now, bias is exactly opposite of this. The bias is this does not consider the effects but only goes by the algorithm. मतलब यार मुझे जो लगता है मैं वही करूंगा, किसी को और को इसको कुछ कुछ फर्क पड़े ना पड़े, मेरा प्रोग्राम क्या है, मुझे ये कहा गया है that this is how it is to be done and I will only do that. In Marathi there is a term called sankamya. That means a person जिसे तुम कुछ बता दो वो अपना दिमाग यूज नहीं करेगा, वो सिर्फ कर देगा उसे, irrespective of कि उसके सामने क्या होने वाला है, उसका रिजल्ट नतीजा क्या होने वाला है, he will not consider any of it. He will just do it. Just do it. So that in such a situation, a bias is exactly opposite of it, where it does not consider its effects, but only goes by the algorithm. Now, what happens if there is an error in the algorithm itself? Now, I believe algorithm as a concept, I will not go deep into it, but it is just a language in which an AI is built. Let's just understand it that simply. Because algorithm in itself is a very vast discussion to talk about, and I don't want to get into it. It's hyper technical, so it's of no use for this topic. So bias is absence of fairness, okay, where you are doing something just by the letter, just by what has been prescribed, just by what has been written in the algorithm, right? You're not using your brain, you're not considering the effects of it, you're just getting it done regardless of its effects, right? We humans are social agents. I don't know ye kiska theory tha, but yes, but humans as a social agent is a brilliant theory that was taught to us in jurisprudence. Ethics and morality, they guide our behavior, they guide our decision making, and that's why uh, all the smallest of the decisions that we take, that we as humans we take, are guided by these things: ethics, morality, how it will have its effect on other people, on someone else. And these are the things that we subconsciously consider whenever we are taking decisions. So bias is something that we need to understand, that bias is absence of fairness. Yeah. Now, why is it important? Now, to rely on AI, we should be sure that there isn't going to be any bias. As I said, अगर किसी टाइप का बायस, किसी प्रकार का बायस उस एल्गोरिथम में है, then the whole purpose of calling it intelligent, it just collapses. It is just autonomous. It is not applying its brain, right? So there we need to understand that biases, if it is going to be there in the AI, it will not just be a difficult thing for the society, but it will expand its functions in such a way that it will not be able to put its intelligence to use. It will just keep doing what the algorithm has told that AI to do, right? To rely on AI, we should be sure that it isn't going to be biased. AI relies on its input data. So, matlab, yahan pe this picture is very apt, I think. It's a nice cartoon, but the programmer or the author is coding something, putting it in the brains of that machine, right? So whatever that author is typing or whatever code that author is making, that code is the only language and the only script that a robot is going to follow or that robot is going to use. So if there is any error or if there is any bias or inclination in that code, that robot will carry that inclination, that robot will carry that bias throughout. And this concept we will be able to understand perfectly with a very interesting case study. So now Amazon, a couple of years ago, what they did was उन्होंने hiring करने के लिए एक AI choose किया, right? They thought that we will appoint an AI for the entire hiring purpose. So what they did was they did the coding and everything, and उन्होंने program करा, and that AI was told that this is what our requirements are, and this is how we want it to be. Now what happened is, because it was a tech company, there were a lot of males, okay, men who started applying to their company. So the AI received all the CVs, all the resumes, and इसमें 70, 80, 90% were males. So the AI started thinking that boss, मतलब अगर males ज़्यादा apply कर रहे हैं, इसका मतलब है males are more deserving for this job. So subsequently, what it started doing is it started eliminating on the basis of gender, because it had developed this intelligence in such a way that men are more competent to get this and men are more credible for this job. It started eliminating all the CVs that it received from women, and that is something that that Amazon understood over a period of time, and they corrected it. In fact, they retracted. They stopped using that AI, if I'm not mistaken. But this is a live case study. So what does it tell us? It tells us that if there is any incorrect programming. So what was the incorrectness in this program? The incorrectness is they should have programmed it in a way that even if a particular gender is, there are more people of a particular gender applying, that does not mean that the other gender is incompetent, that the other gender is, that the other gender should be eliminated. So this command, I believe they forgot inserting this command, and that's why this entire mess happened. So understand that bias is something which poses the greatest threat to an AI, and we are understanding this at a very fundamental level. But this threat can it can have devastating effects in an AI. So therefore, this is one of the most important topics of discussion. Why AI should not be given a legal personality, because if it is given a legal personality, it will keep acting on these biases that it has, right? So how do we eliminate biases? So biases can be eliminated by awareness, by making people aware. For example, racist biases can be eliminated by making people aware. People, as in I'm talking about the programmers. Listen to sociologists and not just technologists. Identify gaps in input and training data. So the data which is being fed to the AI, that data has to go through a lot of scrutiny. And if there are any gaps, if there are any issues, if there are irregularities in that data, then those issues and irregularities should be addressed. Using quality data to train the AI. And another very interesting example in this is, I read this a couple of years ago, there was a chatbot. Now, what happened is that chatbot was at a very nascent stage, and people started using unparliamentary languages with this chatbot. And subsequently, because so many people were using that language with that bot, the bot thought that this is the language that should be used. And it started reciprocating and started responding to its users in the same language, in the same unparliamentary language. Now, this is the seriousness of biases that we are talking about. What happens is the AI thinks that because out of 190 people are talking rubbish with me, That is the kind of talk that is expected from me, and I should be talking the same way. And that's why that chatbot started talking the same way what other people or its users were talking to it. And this bias again it's a speech related bot. So using quality data to train that IA means whenever that IA was being programmed, it should have contained that if such words or such kind of words are being used, then A, you either ignore, do not register, or do not respond to such words. And such words are illegal words or unparliamentary words and should not be considered. So this command should have been there in that AI. Right, so quality data to train the AI is important to maintain the quality of the data that is used to train or input the data, input the AI. Transparency algorithms to be made public. Now, this is a very interesting topic. Why? Because let's say, for example, tomorrow the government starts applying AI for selection of its tender process. So we all know there's a lot of tendering process that happens across the country for smallest of the things. May it be hiring a stationary guy for a bank, or maybe it is hiring some contractor for building infrastructure. So there's a typical tendering process that undergoes this system. Now, what if the government hires an AI system to decide on these tenders, right? So, because there can be a lot of biases in that, it is important that the algorithms of these AIs should be made public. In my view, tomorrow, if the Indian government starts considering AI as a solution, then it should be making the algorithms public under the RTI itself, right? I know it's quite an ambitious thing to expect, but okay. Okay, so I want to also quickly touch upon this very interesting issue that may come up in terms of AI. Uh, this is called reasonable computer standard concept. Now imagine a situation where there is some individual who is crossing the road, and there's a car being driven by a driver जो उस person के बिल्कुल करीब आ जाती है. All right, and unfortunately there is a crash that happens. Now whenever this incident of accident is being discussed, let's say by the judiciary, it will look at the fact that whether the driver has put in the necessary effort to stop the car as a reasonable driver would have put. Correct? So I'll repeat. If the driver who was driving, the court will assess if the driver who was driving, whether he has put the necessary effort as a reasonable driver should have put, then in that case it will be termed as an accident. Right? Now we are relying on a parameter of a reasonable driver. Correct? A reasonable driver, reasonable human driver. Now assume that tomorrow, if this parameter of reasonable human driver is replaced by a computer or an AI, right? So imagine the judge is assessing the situation. If a driver was driving and if he collided with an individual, did he put in reasonable effort as an AI would have put? If yes, then he is not held guilty. If no, then he will be held guilty. Now, this is a it's a big disastrous situation, perhaps a very catastrophic situation that may arise because you are now being compared to AI as a parameter. Previously, you were being compared only to humans as a parameter. Now you have to compete and be compared with AI as a parameter. So this concept is it's a new concept and it's being discussed widely, although it is not directly connected to AI and law, but this is important because tomorrow when we will be discussing liabilities, this concept is going to be replicated at a different stage there. So yes, this is the concept of reasonable computer standard. Can AI be held liable Now we are coming to the liability part. Can AI be held liable? So this question has been bothering and has been a hot topic of discussion across the globe in several communities, and the views of people on this particular topic are very are completely contradicting to each other. There are few people who suggest that yes, the AI should be held liable because it has a legal personality. Others suggest that it should be the creator or the developer or the programmer who should be held liable. Now, again, this is a topic which has to be discussed based on the facts, based on specific facts, right? So it will differ from one situation to another. There is no straitjacket formula that we will be able to apply. If it is a vicarious liability, then it undermines the autonomous status of the AI. That means that if an AI is not held liable and it is always the creator or the author, if the author is being held liable, then you are undermining the autonomous nature of AI. Right. So as I mentioned, that it should be specifically based on the facts of a particular incident, and you cannot have a straitjacket formula, one rule fits all. It cannot happen, right? So I have discussed this and I have elaborated on this point subsequently, so I'll not touch upon it right now. Gray Scott is one of the pioneers, big thinker and a techno philosopher of the age. He's been doing some tremendous work in AI, and this is one of his popular quotes. The real question is, when will we draft an artificial intelligence bill of rights? Now imagine, guys, we started off from understanding what AI is. We started off from distinguishing between an AI, a calculator, and now we are talking about the real question is, when will we draft an artificial intelligence bill of rights? What will that consist of? And this is the best part of it. And who will get to decide that? Let that sink in. What will that consist of, and who will get to decide that? I highly recommend reading, attending his sessions, or reading about his thoughts on his website. Gray Scott, a phenomenal philosopher, and who's done some tremendous work in AI space for the past 6-7 years now. All right, so AI and governance. I hope I'm not boring you. uh, So now we understand, we've understood what is AI, we've understood we've had a discussion about legal personality, we've understood what biases are. Now, what does the governance structure talk about it? Because we all, as I mentioned, are officers of law, are students of law, and governance is something that is the reason why we are in this profession. So what does AI do in terms of government, or how, governance, or how governance can be enhanced with the use of AI? Can there be any special treatment that can be given to AI? Let's check this out. Okay, so the current trends are, we all have come across different kinds of AIs when we access websites, when we use applications, mobile phone applications, and a lot of other things. So the tools are being used in clusters in smaller industries. You have websites, interactive websites, industry specific. For example, in couple of places in India, there are AI devices, AI systems being used in for face capturing, and for assisting the police to catch hold of perpetrators. So different states have different set of laws, policies, and systems, but it is difficult to have a uniform solution. So for example, when we discussed about the tender issue, right? So every state has different set of laws, and that's why it is practically impossible or very difficult, unattainable, to have a straitjacket single formula or a single system which would address these all these issues in one go, because there are different states having different laws. We will have to keep it dynamic, we will have to keep it uh, ever evolving, just so that it accommodates all these laws, all these situations. And most of the AI that we see today is being used in private sector, because there are smaller companies who are using AI who are harnessing the power of AI to attain their goals. There are a lot of technology companies, startups who are using AI in manufacturing, in logistics, in services, and you just name it, in whichever domain you explore, they are there, because they are the ones who are they are the front runners of the AI revolution. And I read this beautiful quote the other day that AI is as much a bigger revolution as the internet was, and as much a bigger revolution as electricity was. So that's the reason why we have to keep ourselves updated and understand uh, how this system, or how this AI as a product can be integrated in our daily lifestyle, so that our daily lifestyle becomes much more easy. Yeah. So what is the government of India doing about AI? A lot of good initiatives, Digital India, Make in India, have been undertaken by government to encourage startups to get into AI space, to encourage startups to explore AI as a system to attain its objectives. The police department and smart policing that I mentioned previously is actually happening in multiple states, where the police is using face scanners and AI technologies to identify people and to catch the perpetrators. So at a nascent stage, at a beginner's stage, the revolution has actually started. Energy saving and maintenance in Pune, I read that the municipal corporation there is using artificial intelligence systems to assess the emissions, to assess the energy consumption, and to regulate the energy supply in different parts of Pune. So it is at a very nascent stage, no doubt, but they have started exploring use of AI in supply and in assessing the consumption of energy. Now, a very interesting app, Kaizala app. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly because it's a Andhra word, but Kaizala app by Andhra government was a fantastic piece of technology that they've been put to use. It's a feedback portal, right? So the users, let's say there are multiple departments in the government, right? So there is water drainage system, or road department, there is school department, education department, so on and so forth. So if there is any irregularity that you see, let's say there are roads which are dug, okay, and you see that issue, you want to address that issue. What you do is you inform that app that there is certain issue on this road. Let's say on Sedapati Bapat road, there is some big patch of road which is dug. Yeah. So you inform the AI app that there is some issue on this road, and the AI app will collect that information and pass it on to the concerned department. The intelligence is being applied not to capture the information, but capture it and pass it on to the relevant department. वो AI को पता है कि मुझे सिर्फ information capture नहीं करना है, but मुझे concerned department के पास उसे भेजना भी है. So that's why it is using its brain, its intelligence, and that's why it is an AI. So again, going back to the basics, autonomous and intelligence were the two essential elements of an AI. यहाँ पे it is autonomous and it is also using its intelligence by capturing the data and giving it to the concerned department, so that the concerned department can act on it. Right. So this is the practical way of how an AI can work in our day-to-day life. So it is not something as big as Robocop or as big as Terminator or something. It's a technology which we all are going to witness at the most basic stage of our life. Something as simple as making coffee, something as simple as making Maggie. Those are the activities which will be subsequently governed by AI, right? Now, if anybody is willing to study more about how the Indian government or Indian society as a whole is being affected, or is considering, or what is the vision of the government in terms of AI, I highly recommend that you should read the research paper by Niti Aayog. It was the first discussion paper was issued in 2018, and subsequently approach document for the Indian society was released in 2021. There were two papers, detailed discussion about 200 pages to 200 pages, and it starts with what AI is, how AI is functioning across the globe. It has broken down the concept of AI to the simplest form. Yeah, so they've discussed need for responsible AI, legal and regulatory systems for managing AI, principles for responsible management of AI. So these are the basic points that the research paper has discussed. There are certain specific points which I will quickly touch upon, is principles for responsible AI. So when we say that AI is a system, right? So when we say as AI is a system, there are certain things that the AI should consider and should ensure that it complies with these points, right? Safety and reliability, equality, the first example that we discussed, right? There should not be any biases based on race, based on gender, inclusivity, privacy and security, accountability and transparency. So these are the guiding principles of how the AI should function, something similar to Article 51A of the Indian Constitution that we have, which is the guiding principle of how the Constitution should function, right? So these principles of responsible AI are essentially the guiding factors of how an AI should function. A very interesting topic. What about judiciary and AI? Right? सब automate करना चाहते हैं, सब जानते हैं, सब चाहते हैं कि judiciary should function quickly, and with judiciary I mean all the departments, all the adjudicating authorities. So well, interestingly, we have some impressive judges in the apex court. I am personally a fan of Justice Chandrachud. I have been a big fan of him right since his Bombay High Court days. So he has been very vocal about absorption of technology, integration of technology in the judicial system. And the Indian judiciary is definitely not shying away from the concept of AI. In fact, in April 2021, the Supreme Court launched its AI portal, which goes by the name Supreme Court Portal for Assistance in Court Efficiency, to leverage machine learning to aid scrutiny of cases and address the existing bottlenecks. Now, on a very practical aspect, uh, some of us, I don't know, but some of us must have worked with adjudicating authority, जहाँ पे a lot of times you file some applications, it goes under scrutiny, फिर उसमें objections निकलते हैं, and a lot of incidences like this keep happening, especially tribunals में या high court में. तो वहाँ पे just for the moment, if you try and understand, if there is an AI which assesses those objections, instead of one person sitting there, which assesses those objections, which assesses the incorrectness of data which is provided and communicates it to the applicant on its own, it will not only reduce the bottlenecks, or it will not only reduce the burden that is there on the judiciary, but at the same time, it will also smoothen the entire process, the subsequent process. I remember in the High Court a couple of years ago, we had to wait for weeks together to get the objections. When we used to lodge petitions, that we used to wait there for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, just so that the department can give its first set of objections. There used to be 3, 4, 5 set of objections. I'm sure my learned friends out here who have practiced in the Bombay High Court in the company department would agree with me. But now things are quite better in the NCLT. But the point here being that these bottlenecks can be addressed, can be eliminated, in fact, by the use of such AI. Right? And is the judiciary completely shying away from it? No, it's just a process which is going to take time, right? I am also citing some judgments here where the courts have in fact taken a good positive view about AI. In C. Siva versus State of Karnataka 2006, the Karnataka High Court discussed the use of AI based on facial recognition software to help Bangalore City Police identify and locate missing persons. Remember, we discussed about the police using face recognition softwares to catch the perpetrators. Similar manner, Tata Sky Limited versus National Internet Exchange of India in 2019, the Delhi High Court suggested that AI be used to prevent identical or deceptively similar domain names to be registered. So right at the inception, the AI will be able to assess if there is any deceptively similar domain name. I think same thing can be also used in the ROC as well, if I'm not mistaken, where deceptively similar names of companies can be avoided. Now, AI, so this is a nice quote, AI should not be used as a tool for human replacement. So this is the biggest worry that all my learned friends, I'm sure we all must be having in our mind, that what if we get replaced by AI? ऐसा तो कुछ होगा नहीं, because honestly, a nice balance was drawn by an author in an article where he suggested that we all have mobile phones. Just 10,000 rupees ka mobile phone, we all of us have. And just for the moment, just think about this. That mobile phone can actually do everything that you have learned how to do till your 12th standard. Let that sink in. Everything that you have learned till your 12th standard, ये किसी चीज को ऐसा करना है, किसी चीज को ऐसे करना है, या you studied something about certain topics. Everything that you studied till your 12th standard can be done by holding a small piece of technology worth 10,000 rupees. Yeah, but does that mean that you will stop sending your children to school? No. The purpose is not to replace human beings. The purpose is to enable the functioning of human beings. And until and unless we are convinced with this fact, until and unless we understand this fact in its right sense, we will never be able to harness the power of AI. Right? So I think I'll just quickly take the next two slides, because I think we will also have to spare some time discussing the live aspects of it. AI and legal profession. How can AI help us in the legal profession? So power of AI, categorization of documents. I'm sure my learned friends here who have a lot of briefs in their chambers will agree that maintaining briefs itself consumes half the energy of a lawyer. So categorization of documents is something that can be done with the help of AI. Now, how can that be done? Just imagine an AI bot is able to categorize the documents based on the cost title. Right? Cost title ke basis pe, if it's an appeal, if it's a trial matter, if it's a Supreme Court appeal, if it's a motion, if it's an interim application, interlocutory application, all these things put together, the AI is able to decide, distinguish, and on the basis of it, it just arranges the documents in such a manner. Right? Can this be done? It absolutely can be done, and there are so many softwares which are already doing this for law firms abroad. Right? So categorization of documents, clerical roles can be performed by AI. Due diligence. Now, we all are professionals, and especially in cases of transactional advisory, we all do this due diligence, which is essentially a checklist that we follow. We see past historical data of the company and try to understand how it is functioning and how it will function post a particular event. Right? So that, I mean, I have discussed this subsequently, but I'll quickly touch upon this. Now, that is something that the AI can assist a lawyer or a CA or a CS in doing, because it reduces the burden which is there on the professional by doing certain tasks which it is programmed to do. Right? So due diligence it can assist the professional. Predictions and maintainability, I have discussed this in the subsequent part, so I will reserve the discussion to that. Case management, court management, billing systems, I've discussed this subsequently, so let's just touch on that topic subsequently when we start the slide. AI and criminal liability. So this statement, a lot of people will agree with me, I'm sure here, that when we study, I distinctly remember one of my favorite professors, late Professor Deshmukh, first day of IPC, and he was known to teach us this statement, the meaning of the gravity of the statement, actus non facetium nisi mensitria, right? So the two elements of criminal liability are mens rea and actus reus. Mens rea, the mental element; actus reus is the actual physical element, right? So AI, and it will continue to do several acts subsequently, may attract criminal liability. Yes, we have to be prepared for understanding what will be the criminal liability of an AI. First is it acts as an innocent agent. Okay, example: an AI is programmed to shoot anyone who crosses a particular gate, right? An AI is programmed to shoot at a person, whoever crosses the gate. Okay, so that's all that the program is, right? It acts as an innocent agent. It does not know the effects of what it is doing, right? Now, if someone comes through a gate, that AI has shot that person and that person is injured. In such a case, it is the programmer or the author who should be held liable, right? Let's refine the facts a little bit. AI acting as a semi-innocent agent, right? What is a semi-innocent agent? That the AI is supposed or programmed to shoot an animal. The AI is supposed or programmed to shoot an animal, but it is not programmed not to shoot at a human being. Okay, so it is programmed to shoot at an animal, but it is not programmed to not shoot at an animal, not to shoot at a human being, right? So what happens is the AI gets confused, right? It shoots the person when the person is crossing the gate. And in such a situation, who should be held liable? It is the programmer, because there was an error in the program when he was programming that AI. Moving on, when the AI is acting independently, right? Now this is where we come, and we should be reminded of the movie Terminator, right? Where AI is acting independently, all right? The programmer has not programmed anything. He has not commanded the AI to shoot, but AI, by using its own intelligence, decided to shoot an individual. Now that is a situation where the AI should be held liable. Now, a natural question thereafter will be, AI को liable, ठीक है, fine, we've held an AI liable, but उसको punish कैसे करेंगे? आदमी को तो we can put him behind the bars, we can hang him to death, we can ask that person to do community service. In terms of AI, what can be done is the software can be deleted, right? The software that governs or that commands that AI can be deleted. It can be suspended, or the software or the AI may also be commanded to do community service. Yeah. Now these are a little hypothetical points, I understand, but because there is no specific law, there is no specific regulation to this effect, these are certain thoughts which certain thinkers have expressed, that these can be the punishments. All right, so we are going to discuss some live examples. Maitri has been kind enough to share some questions, some commonly faced questions. I have tried to address 2-3 of them, and I've also included 2-3 practical problems from my side, which we can discuss. Now, first point that was shared was data collection from clients to assess the facts. Yeah, so I'm sure because we all are professionals here, the first wave or the first time when we meet the client or interact with the client is very important to collect all the facts, to collect all the data that is relevant. It is only after experience that we understand which part of the data is relevant, which is irrelevant. So how can AI be integrated into this system? My view is one can have a chatbot. Now, a chatbot is, we've discussed this previously, when when you log on to a website, there's a pop-up, hello, how can I help you? Now, that chatbot is in fact it's like a miniature of an AI, right? What can be done is that chatbot can be programmed in such a manner where certain information, certain basic information from the client, which will help you take some ground decisions, is extracted from the client, is collected, and is sourced to the backend team. In terms of law, I will give you an example. We can program the chatbot to ask questions such as, what is the nature of the dispute? What is the amount of the disputed amounts? Because that will help us assess the pecuniary jurisdiction. We can ask where the cause of action is. That will help us assess the territorial jurisdiction. We can ask the person, when was the cause of action committed. This will help us assess the limitation part. Now, such other questions that can be asked to the potential client, so that a particular report is created by the bot and passed on to the backend team. Now, when the report is received by the backend team, the backend team exactly knows dispute is for 20 lakh rupees, and the cause of action has arisen somewhere in Andheri. And is there an agreement in place? Yes, there is an agreement in place. The only option that without wasting any time, the lawyer will tell the client that you have to file a commercial suit in the Dindoshi Civil Court. That's it. Correct? It simplifies things to this extent, right? Now, how is enhanced intelligent integrated in this specific example? Now imagine that the client does not have any answers, right? The client does not have any proper answers to the questions posed by the chatbot, and the chatbot keeps telling that client, asking that client ki tumhara dispute kitna hai, ye kitna hai. And somewhere the chatbot gets confused, because the data, the kind of information it is being provided to is not the typical kind of information. And there the bot realizes that this is a little unique kind of a matter, right? It's a unique matter, it's a different kind of matter. And then the bot decides that, okay, now this is going beyond my control. You better consult my partner, you better consult my principal counsel. And that's the situation where the bot realizes there is something else or something more that I need to learn. And the bot, from that moment, it learns a new thing. So tomorrow, if there is one more case similar to that, the bot now has exact answer what needs to be done with this, right? So this is, imagine this, the level at which it will work, and the simplification that it promises in your profession is something that we all cannot imagine. It saves our time, it saves our energy, it saves our we can dedicate the same time to do something else, right? Now chatbots is an answer to that, data collection from clients and to assess the facts. I hope that that solution was convincing enough. Now, there was another query regarding case law and precedent research. It was a long query, but I believe it is about research and precedents. So I'm sure all of us here must have used certain case law search engines. So Madhupatra, SCC, and other engines. Now, most of the databases, or the journals, online journals, they function on the basis of uh, certain parameters, right? You have a section search, right? You have a search by act. You have a search by exceptions, right? You have a search by case law, or you have a search by citations. But what if you just want a situation, you just want to ask, uh, for all my IBC practitioners here, want a judgment for absence of written agreement but acknowledgement of debt for Section 7 application. Can I ask this question to SCC or to Madhupatra today? No. Madhupatra or SCC will give out, either it will give out random answers, right? It will give out answers, it will give out judgment which has all the words in one or more combinations. And then I am expected to go through all the head notes of all the judgments and then arrive at a judgment that this is something that I can use. But that is going to consume a lot of time, right? So now what AI does is AI tries to understand what your requirement is. Okay, you have fed the words into AI with these words, with this sentence. It tries to understand what your requirement is and it gives you the right kind of judgment. Okay, so there are applications, there are added applications which are using AI systems to capture the right judgment and give it to the user. But unfortunately, in India, we do not have systems like that because even SEC or Madhupatra, they are still working in a traditional manner. But I'm sure this is how the AI as a system can enhance the user experience of these websites or of these repositories. I think there is a chat. All right, one more, and I'm going to address this, and I am sure this is going to be the most exciting part of our discussion because I'm going to talk about billing. Something that all of us we struggle through, we have issues with. There are some clients who pay on time, there are some clients who do not pay on time. I remember when I joined the bar at that time, I had gone and met my previous senior, and while discussing, she told me, Ajinkya, अब तुम्हारी responsibility सिर्फ courts में और judgments ढूंढने में और argue करने में नहीं है. In fact, that is going to be your secondary responsibility. I was really confused because this coming from my senior, I was like, oh, what are you trying to say? She said, no. Henceforth, your primary responsibility is going to be to give the right quote to the right client and to be able to secure your fee at the right time. I did not realize this back in time. I was a young guy, but now her words resonate in my ear, and I now understand the accuracy of those words. And I'm sure all of us we must be facing this issue regarding billing. Time to time bills clear नहीं होते हैं, bills बाद में dispute होते हैं. हमको पता नहीं चलता है कि कौन सा client now, this is also something that the AI can address, the AI can solve. Now, how this can be, it's very interesting. I was thinking about this. Oh, by the way, these solutions are out of my own practical experience and coming from my own mind. So, billing के context में, what can be done is the AI can be programmed, right, on the basis of the time to time payment done by a particular client, right? Whether the client in the past, it's all based on historical data. In the past, if that client has been diligent to pay on time, if the client has disputed the invoice amount, if the client has requested for payment in installments, if the client has paid in cash or in bank transfer, if the client has negotiated the quotation and then again negotiated the invoice. I'm sure all of us will agree with this because in the profession, ये सारे professions में है, we face such clients now, and on the basis of the work hours or billable hours that we have built the client for, the AI will assess all these things together. It will create an image about the client. It will combine the same with the billable hours. It will join and it will decide कि fees कितना होना चाहिए इस client. हम सबके पास ऐसे कुछ clients होते हैं जो कभी भी आपकी fees dispute नहीं करते हैं. हम सबके पास ऐसे clients होते हैं जो 50% से negotiation शुरू करते हैं. Right? So these things that now what happens is we are able to do this after a long practice, 10 years, 20 years at the bar, 20 years into the profession. We understand जो बोलते हैं nerves client की. But in the initial years, it's very likely that a professional will lose out on his clients or his fees. The clients will take him for a ride, and it's very common. To avoid all of this, AI can be put to work, right? So technology is a child of imagination, So I think this is how AI can be used in terms of billing or financial management and overall administration of a firm or of a professional. Other 2 points being analytics, forensics, and forecasting. अब especially litigation में और I'm sure tax litigation में भी ये होता होगा जहाँ पे clients हमारे पास आते हैं and there are 2 questions, 2 typical simple questions. First, कि यार आपका फीस कितना होगा, and second, इसमें टाइम कितना लगेगा या फिर इसका सक्सेस रेट क्या है. In terms in litigation, so this is very common, and obviously it's next to impossible to answer that question based on limited facts कि इसका क्या success rate है court में. But after spending 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years at the bar, we do see our seniors who can within 2 minutes assess if there is any success rate in the matter, even if it's constitutional litigation. Now, how do they do that? They do that by understanding what the facts are, and at the same time, they are assessing it with having that 50 years of standing in the at the bar as their experience, right? So they are connecting it to different cases, their past experiences of someone else, experiences of what the judge is like, experiences of what the merit of the matter is, all of it put together within 10 minutes, 15 minutes. They think and they tell you that this matter, it has merit in it or it does not have merit in it. There is 50% success chance, there is 90% success, 100% success chance. Now, how do they do this? As I said, it is all these things put together. Now, this can be done by our seniors only because they have performed the same activity, they have practiced for years together. 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years at the bar, and then they have reached that stage, correct? Now, if the AI is programmed correctly in a particular fashion and a lot of data is provided to it, the judgments, reportable judgments, the kind of judgments a particular judge delivers, the frequency of bench changes that happen, या फिर कौन सा जज कौन से दिन छुट्टी लेता है, all these things, if they are fed in that AI and the AI is taught how to process this data, it is in fact possible to predict what will be the outcome of a matter even before the matter is filed in the court. Now, this is how the power of AI can be harnessed by all of us professionals. Now, what the discussions that we are doing right now are pretty theoretical in its nature, but these will be the guiding principles for development of technology in the next 10 years, 20 years. I think that's a very long time, maybe 5 years, 5 to 10 years. This is how we should, these are the things that we can keep in mind. These are the things that we should consider if, collectively, if we are requesting a company to craft a software for us, where the AI is able to do all these things put together. Imagine the kind of time, energy, and effort we will end up saving by putting the AI to use, and the AI doing all the clerical, all the historical data analysis and giving us a solution in an hour.
Any use case of AI in legal drafting?
Yeah. As much information as possible, right, from the potential client, and put it in a template which is maintained by the backend office, right? So, for example, it's a leave-in license, or let's say it's a shareholders agreement, right? A typical corporate document, or it's a takeover document. Now, what happens is there are certain parts of that document which are the information in those parts is provided by the client, right? So if the bot can secure all those informations put together, right? And upon receiving it, it stores with itself and passes on to the backend office. And the backend office only secures that information and merges that information with a template. You at least have the first draft of the document ready with you to discuss with the client, right? So in fact, Dinesh sir, this is quite common, and there are softwares which are doing this for law firms, and there are some softwares which are there in India as well who are doing this. So yes.
Okay, so the next question is currently what regulations apply for the AI?
Okay, that's a interesting question, but there are no generic or general regulations that apply to AI. Okay, in India at least. But there are certain regulations specifically, let's say, for example, there is a regulation by SEBI which discourages use of algorithmic methods for brokers. If I'm not mistaken, but the regulation pertains to using of artificial intelligence in terms of price manipulations. But there is, as I said, there's a regulation, there's a circular by SEBI, and it is very specific to its nature. So there are no general regulations which apply to artificial intelligence as such, and that's what the government is in its process to consider in the years to come, where it can have a regulatory setup for artificial intelligence as a modality or as a technology.
Regarding the, in the beginning, President Ketan Bhai, he mentioned about, tax authorities using AI
Hmm.
for a, lot of things.
Hmm.
So, is there, is there any specific an anecdote you have, or on taxation matter, or on revenue authority, using AI? So,
Could you elucidate on this aspect? Because honestly, I have not come across any specific software which is being used. But if I can understand the way it is put to use, I will be able to assess and answer that question
so it's mostly
effectively.
big data, the huge
Hmm.
data which is there now. Tax authorities are, able to process the data very quickly,
Hmm.
using, a lot of algorithms,
Hmm.
and come up with uh, uh, whatever discrepancies in tax data very quickly.
Hmm.
Those being the things, there are also certain cases where, income tax authority has used satellite images to prove that the land which was there was not used for farming, and that's why the farming income was denied. So these are the cases which are there.
I'll just
Mm-hmm,
speak one more point here,
mm-hmm.
that the Supreme Court, as I mentioned, it has started with this modality where the screening happens at the inception stage. So that is where at least the basic objections are taken care of, and I'm sure in the times to come, the same processes will be applied to, let's say, High Court, NCLT, even the tax tribunals as well, where the basic objections, the operational objections are cured right at the screening stage itself, and that is where the AI will put its intelligence to use, and those objections are settled, cleared at that stage, so that the applicant does not have to run around clearing those objections from the department. So if that helps you understand, how it will be in
Got
the
it.
judiciary.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes, yes. Okay. So we still have to expect some teething troubles, right? So in case of faceless assessments, a lot of people have, faced a lot of, assessees have faced issues because they were not able to, come up with details on time, and then the notices were this. So these kind of issues, I think we will have to take in record before everything being smoothening out, right?
Yes,
In
yes,
case of
certainly.
in general judiciary, not just taxation part, but
Yeah.
general judiciary. If we want technology to be, at a big, playing an important role, everybody has to be tech savvy. That also has to be there, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's true.